for joining us inside the Dancer's Studio, where we bring listeners like you closer to the creative process. Inside the Dancer's Studio is a program of the National Center for Choreography at the University of Akron, as part of our Ideas in Motion initiative. This episode was recorded in the presence of a virtual audience in the spring of 2021. Today we join Christy Bolingbroke, our Executive Artistic Director, in conversation with New York City-based dancer, choreographer, filmmaker, and photographer, Kayla Farrish. She is the founder and director of Kayla Farrish Decent Structure Arts, through which she shares her vision of intimate storytelling and makes works that delve into socio-political structures and the liberation of people. Her work has garnered residencies and film screenings across the country, as well as commissions by Gibney Dance and Danspace Project in New York.
So you are doing many different things, and I know you work very interdisciplinarily too, but from a choreographic standpoint, how or when did you know that you wanted to also own that hat or become or be a choreographer?
It's interesting because since I was young, I always was just making, and choreographing. From young age, where people would be like, "Do you want to, make up a dance for here, for this school, for church, for the studio I was at?" It was like, "You make up your own recital dances." So I feel like that was already interwoven for me at a young age. And so I just remember even like getting to college programs or different places and then people having different experiences where they're like, "Oh, this is my first time choreographing." And I was like, they didn't have you make up your recital? I don't know, I was like, it's just, I guess like already like a practice in it, and already like when I like learning forms or learning, different dance styles or hearing music, or what I read or films I saw, I'd be like, I could see this. I was already seeing dances happening. So I feel like I knew for a while I wanted to choreograph. I was scared in college. I remember from doing it from this careers and dance class that showed the cost of having a company. And I was like, I don't know about this anymore. But what made the difference? So once I got to New York, I focused more on freelancing and performing and building my career in performance first. But I always had so many ideas, and so I just kept my journal and I'd write them all down. I would try little snippets or make small works for like this small dance festival or this idea until my a friend told me about dance residency programs and funding. Funding through either residencies or small or space grants or things like that. And I felt like that was a huge shift because I was like, if I have support, I can make these works. Yeah. So I know that's like a roundabout question, but
no, it also sounds like, whether it's the opportunities of choreographing for your own recital growing up or, using support and those opportunities as a filter for what sounds like a myriad of ideas. Because, one of the things that I wanted to ask you was like, so how do you start, right? I know some choreographers that they will improvise and they'll work on an idea, and then they're like, this is a piece. And some that will start with writing. So it's such a vast spectrum. What is your process? Where do you begin?
I love content. It's an idea and questions that I like. There'll be these large scale questions that I don't know if I'll actually answer, like ever get to the full answer, or I know that's kind of vague. I mean, like one. Okay. I'm trying to figure out my way of grouping this. But yeah, I start with the idea and the content, and I think a lot of my ideas are around human experience. I'm really interested in people and seeing us, seeing our full range. And those questions pulled up things like about myself or my history or what I was wanting to, my identity, what I wanted to see, what I wanted to change. And so a lot of my work did become more, it had a lot of socio-political themes. So yeah, questioning power with race and gender, like what society allows you to do, how we can push against that, looking at history, lived history, and defiance. But I know that these are large questions, whether they're about these socio-political ideas or about like how I could see myself at my fullest capacity. But they're just open questions because, just hitting the mic. The openness of that question allows you to investigate that in so many ways. So I do a lot of improvisation, love improvisation, and writing. And then a big thing that happened for me, while in New York was picking up a camera, because I started seeing it either in imagery or photography to like scenes and filmmaking. I was like, oh, I also see this, like this like portraiture. But that's already in the choreography of dance. Like while we're
not
movers,
for everyone. Yeah.
I was like, well, I guess because we're still like people, like it is a moving image to me. Like you see, we are people, and there's these relationships that come up or ideas that come up by us being on stage. And it can be abstracted, or can like really lean into like not the literal, I guess, like that translation of the or communicating that story or what's happening. I
mean, I was going to say that it's what I hear is that you don't limit yourself to just, I need to make a dance, all movement, all day long. And we know like the creative process is not a linear one. So that openness for questioning. And what I also heard in you saying, like, you're not going to solve the big questions. So that idea too, that like what you're looking to be inspired by, or maybe the unanswerable questions, is really interesting, because it is something that you can continue to riff off of and expand, and finding the camera as another means to frame or shape the dance. I definitely saw in some of your work with Sunnyside and the Anchors of Iridescence, like how you really use the opportunity of the camera to zero in on the humanness, which I think speaks to your stated interest around storytelling and dance theater as opposed to movement for movement's sake. How and when in the process are you making music choices, or are you choosing your collaborators? And what do you look for in expanding the process to include those people?
I was like, I want to say one thing too. I was thinking about the movement for movement's sake. Cause I was like, lately that's been, cause sometimes I'm like, oh, I work so hard on trying to, I guess, communicate the intention or the internal dialogue that's happening. That sometimes when I feel like dance gets viewed, they're like, oh, they're dancing. I don't need to I don't need to try to understand anymore. And I'm like, no, like we like, sometimes we have like this intention, like, and intention can also be abstract. Yeah, we're people too. I was like, wait. But I've been amazed at also letting myself, I think in other people's processes when I'm freelancing, I like to play with form and movement for movement's sake. And lately in my own process, I've had like some solos that were more based out of like real movement games. Like I said, anything is possible. And it felt very Cunningham-esque to me, where it's just like these, the surprise of like what comes up and accepting it all, of all these different forms and textures. I was like, wow, like just thinking about just how much movement spoke without me trying to like curate that or like be more human. And also what feeling that even the idea of like anything is possible had such meaning to me as a person. Cause I was like, do I believe that? So it's just, I've been thinking about that question too. And I was like, that might happen more in my choreography, but, music. Ooh, sometimes that's with the ideas at the start. Like I'll hear, a song, or I play with text. I'm laughing because my collaborators know I have my phone and I'll record myself creating, like just improvising. And it sometimes sounds crazy, but all the things just come out or so.
That
Sometimes
sounds
really,
very 21st century too, right?
Yeah,
Martha Graham
21st
couldn't
century.
record herself on her phone. Yeah.
She could not. I didn't think about that. That is a 21st century practice, but it's made my monologues or certain audio texts that can take like, that's like, oh, this is the content I've been trying to explain. And sometimes I'm satirical. Sometimes it's like poetic and direct. But yeah, music, I'm really attached to music. And I'm really inspired by what the sound score brings. Sometimes I make mixes of like these different, like if I'm trying to build a genre, I just want to give a specific example. Like I was making a section called Video Honey and trying to explore how women with sexuality and how that's negatively viewed, or how that's like has a lens on it from the beginning.
Yep.
And how women are even like put on screen. And so I like put these different hip hop songs or different songs that didn't have necessarily the best meaning. But they were like these popular songs that were like, yeah. And I put them like just bits of them in order and side by side next to Audre Lorde's text, trying to talk about empowering women and their, and, it's like uses of the erotic, but uses of feeling and intuition, basically. So kind of flipping against those, and that soundscape, it felt really powerful to me because I was going back, like really reflecting on what these sounds and what these words mean, and then putting that alongside someone's writing or ideas on it. And it was like, oh, I can kind of unpack this and not just bop along. But yeah, so sound happens throughout my process. But yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to stop you.
I was just going to reflect that, hearing that very concrete example, it sounds also like how you treat the movement to explore the form a little bit and question. And so, whereas a lot of people, they will not touch the score, right? Like, oh, this music, this song, even, it's 3.5 minutes. This is going to be a 3.5 minute dance. So the idea that you're translating these same questions, both with the body and with music, I would imagine similarly with your film work too, because I noticed that and how you really choreograph with the camera, the editing process, that creates some of those different layers and sort of, collage working, if that might be a term to use for it. It's the same skill set, but your mediums are moving along a vast spectrum. That's what I hear.
I love that. I'm like, oh man, I never noticed that. I was like, because you're right. Like a lot of, I haven't gone to collaborate with many musicians yet, which I'm interested in that. But now that makes me think for those processes, it's like, how much can we play with the score or mix it up? Because sometimes I'm like, do you need to fill up a whole song? Do you I do like abrupt cuts or letting things build. That range, that's interesting. And then you're also, I feel like there's a lot of heavy music influences once again from when I was younger. And I think of like Sam Cooke and Nina Simone came later for me, and then just doing the Louis Armstrong project. And so there's like these like soul singers that also did like socio-political work. And my dad loved musical theater. So I was taking in all these different sounds. So I am really inspired by music and music video. And then I wanted to answer your question about collaborators.
Yeah.
When do I pick collaborators? I feel like it goes in different ways. Oftentimes when I imagining the content or the ideas, I can either see they're often people that I've been around or gotten to perform with in other company work or just have seen. And I'm like, oh, I can envision them in this idea, or I think they're going to challenge how I would move or how I would respond. And I was like, I want a different perspective, and I like a lot of discussion. So I really I like to work with collaborators that are interested in embodying content, questioning content with me. I do. I'm unpacking this. I do like a collaborative process. I really like the discussion and soundboard that expands, the answers to those unanswerable questions. I'm just posing the question. And then I, guide the trajectory of the work of like, okay, how are we going to go through these answers? And like, what are we unfolding? What's the intention? What's this path? So some of them end up those ideas and answers end up in there, and some of them don't. And then other times, sorry.
No, please continue. It'll hold.
And I enjoy a lot of partnering and physical movement. So I look at artists who have physicality or also are into partnering. And sometimes it's just artists that I'm really interested in. I'm just like, can we make something? And that's been really fruitful and lovely, because sometimes it's people I don't have a relationship with. And I'm like, I have this idea. Will you come to the studio and try it? And it's just this magic that I didn't expect.
What a rich invitation, and also an openness to trust, because there are a lot of people who won't invite those into the process until they're like, we got to go on a couple dates first. So what I also appreciated and was going to reflect is that unpacking what collaboration means. I think that's becoming more jargon, both in dance, not just the performing arts, but in the world, right? We look for a collaborative team. We're looking to hire someone who can work well with others and collaborate. And there are a lot of different ways that people can collaborate. And I've certainly seen this in the performing arts too, right? Like whether it's a composer and a choreographer, and the composer says like, I will send you the score when it's done. And there is no back and forth. There is no questioning of content. Or similarly, a lighting designer who's like, I'll come in and I'll watch one rehearsal, and then, I'll do my thing separate. And so it's a little bit more, just product oriented, as opposed to being a part of the process. So that's something we hadn't heard yet. And I appreciate that you named it. A little more product oriented. I did want to ask, and this is a big question among our students, how do you name something? How do you name a dance when it's not fully done yet sometimes? Like how do you do something that seems so finite for such an open process and way of working?
Names for me, it's like I feel like I have a harder time usually with descriptions, actually. Of like trying to really, I think because the questions I ask are so, maybe that's why they're so ranging, or like the content is so ranging that I like when it's really early on in the process, I'm like, I can tell you what it might be about, but I really don't know. The titles, I feel like the titles really, what helped me was all the writing, or just is writing in general. Because sometimes I pull it from poetry. Sometimes I'm pulling it from like the writing that I was doing on the work, just getting ready for it. It just the titles normally, how I know that it fits is it just to me it feels right. I don't know, it has feeling, and whether I know what the piece is or not, it just feels like it contains what I hope to say. Even if it's like the ledge of it. And so sometimes mine is like, I think I have long titles though. And sometimes mine is almost a sentence, like a fragment. And sometimes it's, I was like, do I have single word ones? I don't have many single word ones. I was thinking like Black Body Sonata, Anchors of Iridescence. I think they're something with feeling or something I can see. Working on something called A Beast That Came Apart Midair. And that came from actually me watching a visual. I was watching a show and I was like, that's what I was like, it has this metaphor and the symbolism of what I see this new idea to be. I don't know if that helps. I think writing and just trust the gut and feeling.
No, it does. It's something, I think it's reframing the challenge around, right? Like when we ask someone for a title that it can come across very limiting, but even hearing you be able to name, like you don't do one word titles or you haven't yet, and that sometimes it's a sentence, it immediately evoked more for me that a title is not meant to be a box or a container, but a prompt for the audience to consider when they're watching your work. And so I love that. I was like, okay. And you also alluded a little bit to like you were watching, a show and that gave you a title or related to something you were working on. Someone tuned in from tuning in Akron has asked like, so what is some content that is inspiring you right now? I think as we're all maybe a little screen, like wiped but still like absorbing so much. Like what sort of content are you vibing on?
Hello. Thank you for writing in. I'm really into, so I'm working on this current film, Martyrs Fiction, on dreaming and surrealism. And at the start, I could not really tell you about surrealism. I was like, what is that? And just in that starting question of surrealism, while I know it relates to reality, it began this like big question just because the dreaming was so open I was like, who gets to afford to dream? Like because sometimes like when you're just thinking about survival, as we are in a pandemic and also thinking about race and power and I mean, there's different oppression. There's lots of different people that experience this. Yeah, it was like, do you really have space to dream? And that's really morphed into, or you do have the space to dream. That's not the full question I want to say, but that morphed into, people were telling me the themes I was talking about sound more like magical realism. So this new idea I'm thinking about is if we could travel through history and look at different ways that people have survived and like make that our power or realize that we have that power within us. There's a lot, that I want to explore in that. And I want to explore culturally about Black people and an ode and in celebration and some things within my own history, like documentary style. So I guess that, yeah, some of the content that I'm inspired by is magical realism. And sometimes that comes from literally the people around me, like getting to talk to my family members. Some of the physical content I've been watching, I love Lovecraft Country. If anyone's watched that, people have been telling me like Octavia Butler for the books and Toni Morrison and some Latin American artist. I am forgetting their name right now. But someone else wrote a name, Isabel Allende.
We take recommendations too.
I'm taking them. And music. I've been just taking a lot of music in over this pandemic time, just sound and walking around outside and imagining different worlds.
Yeah. You have such a spirit of abundance, which just speaks to me. It's a curatorial value we hold at NCCAkron as well. So I can't imagine, but at the same time, I'm sure we all have these days. And for our non-choreographers, but anyone who's had to face the blank page or a big deadline, what do you do when you are facing a rut, a creative rut? You've hit a wall, but yet you've got to keep making. You're working against something. Do you have any tools that you might share or practices to kind of circumvent that challenge?
Ooh, the rut. I feel like the rut for me this year was being resistant to change or not understand. Like for me, it wasn't like creatively running out of ideas, but it was like, sometimes not trusting my ideas or judging them, but also I think, I want to say when you're unclear, like being in a really unclear, muggy places and having a deadline. And I'm like, I was like, is this what I want to do?
Yeah. Where to go from here? Yeah.
But I think those are very human places, and I think they're very honest places. And all these different places that you haven't experienced before. I'm always surprised. I'm always surprised again with 21st century practices when I set up my camera or my phone and watching myself on like days in rehearsal where I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not going to use any of this. And I come back like a month later and watch it. And I was like, that was brilliant. I've never made anything like that in my life. And it's just being in that different headspace or you're in a new space and new things come out of that. So I mean, that was one side of it, is just I was just trusting a bit more the process, or like the process will reveal itself. But, things that I do for ruts are, is there another way to question this idea? Is there another entry in? Like maybe the entry, like maybe this isn't the entry point. I'm having a hard time getting in. So I'm like, this doesn't like make sense for me right now or feel right. And then sometimes for me, it's just doing it, like using other mediums, or looking at maybe how other people have responded to that, like taking in other artwork, like what are you seeing? What are you reading? What are you experiencing? Because sometimes you're so in it, and you need to open out. It's like, I can't solve it.
Right. Because you're too close to it. You can't see all of it. That's a
like those painters.
Great
get
note.
Back. They're like, let me move back. Yeah.
Yes. It's been so lovely to get to talk with you. I have one last question, and that is, in making a creative life, what advice might you offer to folks who are in the process of doing that right now, or our students who are also thinking about what's next as they continue their college career before entering the real world?
Yeah, I think, well, first, I think all of you are so bold and brave, and also it's going to be so great when you're out here. I know pandemic, I was going to say pandemic land. I don't want to make light of it. Pandemic time adds on certain fears. And I think what helped me the most coming to New York, and I chose New York without having a secure job or anything like that. I chose it because of opportunity and the range, whether that was in freelance performance, whether that was in making work, different industries. But I feel like that openness to the puzzle pieces, like the openness to, okay, I want to try and see what this company's process is like. I'm going to, you know, if you were talking to me before, I'm going to work with Helen. I'm going to work with Kate. I'm going to tour with AIM. I'm going to try Sleep No More Dance Theater, which is these different practices. I'm going to make a music video, you know, I'm going to make something for the stage. And those opportunities, sometimes they just come up, like people, you know, see what you're doing and they're like, hey, can you do this? And I think you should. Like if it speaks to you, even if it is something that you're afraid of, I think you should do it and see what comes out of it. Because I feel like I found different loves and different dreams. Like I thought I was going to have a couple, like the same dream. And then I got here and I was like, oh, there's so much I want to do. So I think just being open and seeing what you're really excited about. And then you can prioritize, or hopefully, you can form around what you're really excited about. That's what makes me feel like I'm building my creative life. Now that I know more about like what I want to do, and that'll probably still change now that I said that.
But and with the magical realism and introducing dreaming, this encouragement to have more than one dream. I couldn't imagine a better ending. Kayla, thank you. Thank you so much for dreaming with us, for going out on a limb and telling us a little bit more about your practice. Keep dreaming and find more than one dream. I love it. Thanks so much, y'all.
Bye. Thank you.
Inside the Dancer Studio Lunchtime Talk Series is supported by NCCAkron, the University of Akron, the University of Akron Foundation, and the Mary Schiller Myers Lecture Series in the Arts. Our podcast program is produced by Jennifer Edwards. Ellis Rovin is our composer and editor. Transcription by Madeline Greenberg. Theme music by Flaco Torres. Cover art by Micah Kraus. And Julian Curate and Kat Wentz are our artist coordinators. To learn more about NCCAkron, please visit us online at nccakron.org or follow us on Instagram or Facebook at NCCAkron. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we encourage you to subscribe on your favorite podcast streaming platform by searching Inside the Dancers Studio. Thank you for listening, and stay curious.